Please welcome John Oakes. Hi, John.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So, I'd like to start with diving right into the commercial swimming pool end of things. One of the first biggest mistakes that in conception that people make concerning swimming pools, particularly apartment complexes and condominium associations, is assuming that their swimming pool on their property is similar to the swimming pool in someone's individual backyard, and they're very very different. The um, the Florida Department of Health and Building Department differentiate between residential and commercial swimming pools to the extent that um, they actually require different builders' licenses. There's a residential pool construction license and there's a commercial pool construction license, and they're different licenses. And their capacities do overlap some, but you definitely need to have a commercial license to build commercial swimming pools. The definition that the Department of Health and the Building Department use to define residential versus commercial swimming pools is as follows. If the pool is intended to serve one family unit or one living unit and their guests, it's considered a residential swimming pool. If it's intended to serve two or more living units, condominium apartments, apartment complex, hotel, then it's a commercial pool, and it falls under very different, much more stringent construction guidelines, as well as um, monitoring and oversight. The Department of Health actually issues an operating permit for every commercial swimming pool in the state of Florida, and that permit needs to be renewed each year. So, looking at the commercial pools, which is what this class is supposed to focus on, there's three different types of commercial swimming pools. They're classified by the Department of Health and the Building Department. The first one is a skimmer pool. A skimmer pool looks a lot like a residential backyard swimming pool because it's typically they're a little larger, but they'll have multiple skimmers. The skimmer, where the water goes in a little box on the side and skims the floating debris off the top. A skimmer pool in the state of Florida can only a commercial skimmer pool in the state of Florida can only be up to 1,000 square feet of water surface area. When the size of the swimming pool exceeds 1,000 square feet, it it has to turn into what they call a gutter pool. And I'm sure everybody in Florida has seen a gutter pool. The gutter pool has a perimeter ledge around the swimming pool that typically has a little bit of water in it. If the pool is over 1,000 square feet, it has to be a gutter pool. And then the third classification of commercial swimming pools is specialty use pools, which that's sort of a catch-all. It includes spas and hot tubs, splash parks, splash pads, and competition swimming pools. And there's a completely different set of requirements for the specialty use pools. The biggest difference, the most notable difference between a residential swimming pool and a commercial swimming pool is that in your residential swimming pool, the circulation pump draws water out of them directly from the main drain and from the skimmer. That's not allowed on a commercial swimming pool. On a commercial swimming pool, we're not allowed to have pumps drawing water out of the basin of water that people swim in. So the strategy to achieve that is that the commercial swimming pools always have a collection tank, which is a separate body of water. Typically, it's over with the equipment. That tank has to be set so that when the pumps are off, the water level in the tank and the water level in the swimming pool reach equilibrium. So when we turn the pumps on, it pumps water out of that tank through the sanitation system, through the filtration system, and back to the swimming pool. But by drawing the water level in that tank lower, then the water in the swimming pool runs through those open pipes via gravity. So the main drain water, the water that leaves the pool through the main drain is just gravity flow, and the water that's leaving the swimming pool through the scum gutter or the skimmers is also just gravity flow. The whole reason for that is to eliminate the possibility of swimmer entrapment. And there's no bending that rule. The health department is, almost all of the health department rules, regulations, and design requirements surround safety, swimmer safety, and public safety around a swimming pool. So moving from the structure of the swimming pool, the circulation system, I'm sorry, the filtration system. Can we go to the next slide, please? The sanitation system. So sanitation is obviously important for swimmer safety. The sanitation is defined as balancing the water chemistry. We've all heard that term. The way we do that in commercial and residential swimming pools is typically by adding chlorine bleach to kill microbes and bacteria and things that we don't want to swim with. And then we need to control the pH of the water. And the way we do that is by introducing either baking soda, which is sodium carbonate, to raise the pH, or muriatic acid to lower the pH. So keeping the water chemistry balanced in a commercial swimming pool is something that the health department monitors very closely. Something I meant to mention earlier is that a commercial swimming pool has to have a CPO, which is a certified pool operator, that manages the swimming pool. There's a relative, the CPO is I think it's the beginning entry level of the licensing that the health department offers. But you either have to have, as a CAM or a condominium association board member, your condominium, if it has a pool, has to have a CPO managing the swimming pool, and that can either be a condominium association employee, or it can be a pool service company that has either a contractor's license, a service license, or a CPO on staff. So moving back over to the sanitation, there's several different methods of sanitizing pool water. The old school method is what they call manual dosing. And that's when your CPO or your pool service company takes the little test kit, tests the water chemistry, and then either typically adds chlorine or muriatic acid or sodium bicarbonate to get the chemistry within the parameters that the health department requires. Speaking of those parameters, the parameter for the pH in a swimming pool is supposed to be maintained between 7.2 and 7.8. The other side of that, which is the chlorine, can be measured a couple of different ways. The little test kit is one method, but the parameters that the health department lists are 1 to 10 parts per million chlorine. And that can also be reported in millivolts, this comes from the ORP controllers, which I'll mention in a moment, but it's basically measuring the conductivity of the water, which varies or is influenced by the amount of chlorine in it. But for future reference, the health department specifies that the chlorine content of chlorine conductivity of the water needs to be 650 to 750 millivolts. So manual dosing is one method of adding sanitizers to the water. There's rules about that. The pool must be closed for them to introduce chemicals, which seems pretty like it makes sense. The second one is it must remain closed for an hour after manual dosing has added chemicals to the pool, and then the pool can open. Most commercial swimming pools are getting away from the manual dosing because it's so dependent upon the individual that goes out and does that, and it's really not very accurate. The first upgrade above manual dosing is manual dosing pumps, which a Stenner pump is a brand name of a pump that we see lots of on commercial pools. And it's a little pump that is basically on a timer, and it incrementally introduces there'd be an acid pump and there'd be a chlorine pump they're pumping out of storage tanks of those chemicals, where in your pool area you would have a storage tank that holds uric acid in one tank and then chlorine in the other tank. And these pumps are adjustable. There's a little collar on the bottom where you can turn the knob and increase or decrease the amount of chlorine or acid that's being pumped into the pool. One of the things that the health department does require the CPO to do is record the two water chemistry values, which we've talked about, the pH and the chlorine content, several times a week. I'm not sure how many days that is. I know it's at least 3 days a week that they have to keep that log for the health inspector to review when they come by. So the latest and greatest state-of-the-art sanitation system is called an ORP controller. And this is a little computerized system that we see on almost all of the newer pools. They're required on spas and splash pads. They're not required on all swimming pools yet, but we're heading in that direction. And what the ORP controller does is it has a little test bowl. The water from the pool, whenever the circulation pump is running, it pumps water through this bowl, and there's sensing probes that are in that bowl, and they're constantly sensing the millivolts or the chlorine content of the water and the pH. And these systems are programmable so that you can program in the parameters that the health department requires, and the pump will, or the ORP controller, the brain box in there, will automatically adjust the Stenner pumps to pump at a rate that will maintain those sanitation levels. The top of the line that ORP controller that we use is called a Hayward Cat 5 or Cat 4000, and that one has been upgraded to the point that it, with a Wi-Fi connection, it will report to anybody's cell phone or computer, and you can set the parameters to what the health department requires, and it will constantly report to your, let's say my cell phone, what the chemical balances are at the Marina Point Condominium Association pool. You can also set alarms so that in the event that those the chemical balance of the swimming pool gets out of those parameters, it'll ping an alarm on my phone, and I'll know that we need to go do something to adjust that. We highly recommend if you're upgrading your pool equipment and you do not have an ORP controller, that you add one. It just makes it a much safer and more consistently sanitized swimming environment. What's our next slide, please? Pool safety requirements, specifically monitored for, well, they're required at construction by the Department of Health, and they're monitored with the either annual or biannual inspections. But the safety requirements include a very extensive list of things, but the most common ones that we see problems with, number one, are fences and gates. And the requirements for a fence are that they must be 4 feet tall. There can be no horizontal member that can be used as a step for a child or individual to climb over the fence. And the gates must swing out away from the pool. They must be spring-loaded hinges so it automatically closes, and it must have an automatic latch that hooks. The reason that they require that the gates swing in an outward fashion is that if you think about a little toddler that's gotten away from his mom, and he gets over by the pool because it's pretty and it's sparkly and he wants to get over to it, if he goes over and leans on a gate that's not latched and the gate opens in, it'll open and allow the child in. If the gate swings out, a child leans on it to open it, it pushes it shut and it latches. And it's a much more advanced skill set to be able to grasp a gate, walk backwards and open it and walk in. That's the health department's theory, and that's the reason that we have the gates all configured that way. This is something that is inspected. The other parameter on the gate is that the release latch, the release mechanism, must be 54 inches high, and there can be no place in the fence or gate assembly that a 4-inch diameter sphere can pass through it. Why 4 inches? I don't know. That seems very tight to me, but little kids can squirm through the smallest holes if they're motivated properly. Safety equipment on the pool needs to be kept up to date and needs to include a shepherd's hook with a non-telescopic pole. It has to be a fixed pole. There must be a throw ring with 50 feet of cord. Those, in some cases, depending on the size of the pool and the size of the pool deck, you may have to have more than one safety equipment station. Next slide, please. So this is particularly pertinent to CAMs and board members. From time to time, you'll need to renovate your swimming pool, and that can be tricky. The health department will grandfather in, as codes change over the years, they'll grandfather in things that met code at the time that the pool was built to a certain extent. Excuse me, what triggers having to bring everything up to today's current code is when you refinish the swimming pool. Some of the codes that we have seen change over the last, say, 10 years are the ladders that you get in and out of the pool with on the deep end. They used to be just a C-shaped ladder that comes up and mounts into the deck and braces against the side of the swimming pool. Now we have to have what's called a cross brace ladder. They're about, I don't know, $1,400 to $1,600 to replace a standard ladder with a cross brace ladder. But the whole reason for this change in the code is that rambunctious little boys discovered that it was a really cool game to get in the deep end of the pool and put your feet on the wall, grab the ladder and pull it out because it would flex out, and have your buddy swim behind it. That's fun for 3 or 4 times. And then the next cool trick is to let it go and it traps him up against the wall and you've caught him. The problem with that was that he was underwater and there were several drownings because of this. The health department responded to that, changed the code, and now the ladder has this cross brace member in it, and you can't pull it out away from the wall. That's just one example. But as you're considering the scope of work that a pool contractor may be proposing for renovating your swimming pool, keep in mind that once they close the swimming pool to refinish it, everything on that commercial swimming pool is going to have to be brought up to today's codes. And they will not let you reopen that swimming pool until you meet those codes. I've been delayed before on an opening because the fence didn't, or the gate hinges didn't meet code. It didn't cause the gate to automatically swing shut, and we had to go back and do an additional work order for that because it wasn't mentioned in the scope of work. Another area to pay particular attention to in your scope of work, if you've got a pool contractor that's going to be renovating your swimming pool, is the color of the interior finish that you're going to select. The code is a little bit vague at first, the first part of the code, and it says that this is the health code. It must be a pastel color, light background pastel colored finish. If you read the typical Florida building code, you'll find that there are certain reflective values that each one of the manufacturers has to publish with each one of their colors of finish, so that and that determines whether or not it meets code. So you need to be sure that the interior finish that is going to be installed on your renovation meets that the criteria of not only the health department, but the local building department. Tile is something that's changed probably 5 or 6 years ago. It used to be that the edge of the step and edge of the bench tiles had to be a non-skid tile, but on a gutter pool, the perimeter waterline tile is what we call it. It's at the front of the gutter, did not have to be non-skid. That code changed 4 or 5 years ago, and now it all has to be a non-skid tile. If your pool contractor doesn't acknowledge or recognize that and installs a glossy tile on that water line, your pool's not going to be opened until it's tiled yet again. What's our next slide, please? Well, let me back up a second. If you're interviewing pool contractors to renovate a commercial swimming pool, or any swimming pool for that matter, here in Florida, we have high groundwater in many places, and you may have heard the term pool pop. And what that refers to is when there's high groundwater and you take the water out of a swimming pool because you're going to work on it. And then that big heavy concrete shell turns into a boat and it actually floats up out of the ground. That's a catastrophic event. It's a failure. I take out, or Oakwells takes out, removes 2 or 3 typically residential swimming pools a year where someone has drained the pool. It floats up out of the ground, it pops. There's no saving that. You cut that pool up bring the concrete cutters in, cut that pool up into rubble, haul it off, and build a new pool. So it's a hugely catastrophic event. The reason I'm telling you all of this is that although all of us pool contractors that pull permits from building departments are required to have liability insurance, the typical contractor's liability insurance specifically excludes pool pop events in very fine print. So when you're interviewing a potential pool contractor and he's going to do work that's going to include draining your pool to do that work, be sure that they provide you with not only a liability certificate, but the liability certificate of insurance that also includes the pool pop rider. Those of us that do carry that additional insurance pay extra for it, but that extra insurance premium is spent to protect you, the property owner or property managers. So that was kind of falling under the vetting the contractor idea. Today we have Google reviews and we have even Facebook reviews, which are an ideal way to evaluate a potential contractor. But I would also highly recommend asking for some recent clients that particular pool contracting company has worked for, and their phone number and authorization to call them and ask about their experience. We have an awful lot of pool contractors in Florida that are marginally in business and constantly leaving customers in the breach. As a matter of fact, just this week, out of Oviedo, Florida, it made the news. Presidential pools went out of business, left, I think it was 35 or 36 pools partially constructed, and the customers having paid them most of the money. So really spend some time to research who it is that you're considering hiring to do this kind of work. That would be vetting the contractor. The other thing to take into consideration, any significant work that's going to be done, whether it's the equipment pack replacement, refinishing the swimming pool, retiling the swimming pool, resurfacing the deck, is going to require, at a minimum, Department of Health permit, and in many cases, a local building permit as well. And I've heard of a number of cases where the pool contractor contracts with the HOA, and the HOA, not understanding what all the rules are, allows them to begin work without actually pulling the permit. That will get around to the health department, and they will shut your pool down until the permits are applied for, approved, issued, and then there'd be inspections. The other interesting part about renovation planning and renovating a commercial pool is, keep in mind you are going to have an in-person health inspection with the health inspector from the local county office, who's going to walk around, hold hands with me or whoever your contractor is, and look at everything before they allow you to open the pool again. Next slide, please. equipment and deck features. So in some cases, the commercial swimming pools will have an equipment yard. In other cases, we'll have an equipment room. And in the third case, we have an equipment pack. So most people are familiar, most people that are involved with commercial pools at all are familiar with a vac pack. Vac pack is actually a company here in Jacksonville that builds pool equipment sets, and they build them inside of a fiberglass cabinet. And it's kind of become a generic term. Everybody talks about a vac pack, but they're just one of the manufacturers that build the equipment this way. One of the nicest features about the vac pack systems are that, number one, it's in a fiberglass box that has latches on it so you can lock it. The health department requires that you be able to separate your pool equipment from people using the pool, either by a fence, a wall, or in this case, a fiberglass box works. There's quite a few older swimming pools that have sort of an equipment room. It's kind of a bomb shelter looking little square room off on the corner of the deck. You typically go down 8 or 9 steps to get into the equipment room, where you'll have your pumps, your filtration system. And one of the bad things that happens in there is people have a tendency to want to store their chemical crocs inside of that room. And unfortunately, the muriatic acid and the chlorine are very corrosive, and they're constantly gassing off. The inside of those rooms, just everything completely corrodes and rusts if you keep your chemicals in that area. We recommend that you keep your chemicals outside in a locked area or in a crock that has a lock on the top of it. Backpack or Compact or Aquaworks, which are the 3-pack manufacturers, all sell chemical crocks with locks on them so that we can do that. So in the equipment side of things, originally, as far back as I can remember, we just ran pool pumps. And within about the last 10 years, everybody's going, this is because of the NEC code, the National Electric Code requires us to go to a variable speed programmable pump, or a VFD, which is a variable frequency drive. And what that allows us to do is adjust the flow rate of the recirculation system, which is driven by the pump, to just meet the requirements of the health department. It helps your pool be more efficient, because traditional electric pool pump motors ran at 2 speeds, 3,450 RPMs and off. And because these pumps typically run 24 hours a day, it really is a savings for the HOA or the apartment complex if you program that pump just to meet the required flow rate that the health department publishes and determines when the pool's built. And that's listed on your operating permit, by the way. It's a little bit of an investment to upgrade to a variable speed pump or a VFD, variable frequency drive, but it pays for itself in spades over the next couple of years in electrical savings. Moving to filters, we typically have 3 types of filters that we use in the commercial swimming pool industry. The first one is the one that you see on many residential pools, which is just a cartridge filter or a series of cartridge filters. This is a canister with pleated fabric inside of it that the water is either pushed through or pulled through, and it removes debris from the water. That filter is pretty simple to clean. You turn the pumps off, open the canister, take the cartridge out, spray it down with a garden hose, and replace it about once a year. The next type of filter that we see is a DE filter, which once again has filter grids, but the filter grids are coated with DE powder or perlite, which is a substitute for DE powder that's acceptable these days. The primary difference between a cartridge filter and a DE filter is how you clean the filter. On a DE system, you turn the pumps off, you drain the tank or the basin that the filters are in, and then you use a pressure washer or a garden hose with a nozzle on it to spray all of that DE off of the grids. And then the DE is pumped out by an auxiliary pump and it's pumped to waste. One of the biggest sins that we see on pools with DE filters is that there's also a DE separator that's built into the system that separates the DE out of the wastewater so it doesn't go into the storm sewer or the sanitary sewer or into the yard around the pool equipment. That stuff is designed to block passages. That's what it does on the filter grids so that it catches debris. And it doesn't take long at all to completely block the storm sewer system or a sanitary system. And the local municipality will lose their mind if they catch you pumping DE into their system. So the sin that we see is that this is just, it looks like another cartridge filter, but it's just got a strainer basket in it. It strains the DE out. And we see pool maintenance people removing that strainer and just pumping that right to waste. Do not let that happen. There's fines associated with that if you get caught doing it. The third kind of filter is a sand filter, which the filter medium inside of a sand filter is sand, as you might guess. It's actually gravel and then sand. And as the water pumps through that, the canister that has these distribution grids inside of it, as the water runs through the sand, all of the particulates and debris that might be floating in the water is filtered out of it. That is also backwashed, just like a DE filter is. You run water through the system backwards, and it pumps the refuse to waste. So it doesn't matter which one of those types of filters you have, they still need to be cleaned, should be cleaned weekly. Kind of doubt that happens with most pool service companies, but that's what the plan should be. The next area, if you're renovating your swimming pool and you're going to do any deck work at all, the part of your pool deck that the health department is concerned with is the wet deck. And the wet deck is defined as the first 4 feet of deck space from the water's edge backwards. So in this picture that we're looking at here, just right where the wording part of it starts, that would be the back of the water's edge, and 4 feet from there back is the wet deck. And the wet deck must have a 2 to 4% slope away from the swimming pool. This is something that when you do deck work that the health department measures, and it used to be somewhat debatable because of the way they measured it, but nowadays they've upgraded their staff to having what's called a smart level, and instead of having to measure the bubble and measure and calculate the percentage, it reads out the percentage for you. So if you have a paver overlay done on your deck, it's imperative that your deck installer understands that he has to preserve that 2 to 4% slope away from the swimming pool. And you might guess why that's important. And the reason that it is we don't want rainwater or pool splash water washing whatever's landed on that deck up there back into our swimming pool. It needs to flow away from the pool. So can I have the next slide, please? Black algae. That's the devil of the industry. So black algae is a very pervasive problem. Black algae is everywhere in Florida. If you walk through the woods, there's black algae on the leaves of the plants. It's just, it's very pervasive. When black algae takes hold in a swimming pool, it's extremely difficult to get rid of. The reason that we get black algae is twofold. Number one, well, to understand that, let's think about black algae for a second. Like most algae and fungi, it reproduces by means of spores, which I don't know that they're microscopic, but they're definitely little tiny. And they float around in the air. They end up in your swimming pool. If your swimming pool water chemistry is not caustic enough by having the water chemistry balanced like the health department requires, those spores don't get killed, and they will attach to the interior surface of your pool and then start growing black algae. Two things prevent black algae. One is water chemistry, and the second one is brushing that pool, because the filtration system will take the black algae spores out of the water if they're in the water. It's when they're allowed to rest on, say, the wall or the floor, and it's typically down in corners where the circulation is not fantastic or it's not as aggressive. And then you'll see black algae begin to grow. Black algae is a monster to get rid of. And once a pool has black algae, the only way to surely get completely rid of it is to refinish the swimming pool. There are a couple of treatment methods that you can contain it and minimize it. They're very labor intense. It's sending your pool guy into the pool with a wire brush and either a chlorine tablet, which he wire brushes the black algae off of the wall and then sanitizes the area by rubbing a tablet on it. Or if you want to be a little more aggressive, you can send him into the pool with that same wire brush or scraping tool and then a wire brush and then some uric acid and dose it with straight uric acid. Autofill failure. That is a very, very common problem. So typically in the collection tank of your swimming pool, your commercial swimming pool, we see Toro valves, which is an irrigation valve, and a hose spigot and a float mechanism. And that needs to be adjusted. It should be adjustable. They are adjustable if they're intact, so that you can adjust the water level in the swimming pool so that when you have evaporation or you have a large group of swimmers or a lot of splashed out water, it automatically refills the pool. We call that makeup water, and it loads it into the tank. And then the tank, of course, the pump, of course, picks that water up and sends it back to the swimming pool. Autofills are really important because about the time a gutter pool loses a half an inch of water, the scum gutters around the perimeter of the pool are no longer skimming, and your sanitation and filtration system is handicapped. So it's very important to keep the autofills working and keep the water at the pool, the water in the pool at the correct level. Emergency shut off. So on public spas, there's a timer that has to be within, I think, 10 feet of the spa. There's a clock that has to be visible from the spa so that you know how long you've been in there. And there's also an emergency shut-off switch, which has to be visible and right there. That's not a requirement for the swimming pool. So it would be important for your certified pool operator, maybe your manager, UCAMs, and maybe a maintenance guy to all know where the breaker box is on the pool equipment in case there's a need to in case there's an emergency which causes you to need to turn those pumps off. It's typically just a breaker that flips and you're done. So the next thing I'd like to talk about, well, let's see what's on the next slide, please. Black algae. I'm not ready for that yet. I've got something else that I want to talk about. So the operating permit tells you several things. It tells you what the flow rate is or the turnover rate on your swimming pool. That means how fast the water needs to be flowing. And there's a flow meter inside the equipment area tapped into one of the pipes that tells you what the flow rate is. And you have to maintain that. The operating permit also tells you what the volume of the pool is. It tells you the number of allowable swimmers, which that is a function of the number of living units in the complex. And the other point that is made there is your swimming pool will either be open for night swimming or open dawn till dusk. And if it's open for night swimming, you're not allowed to have color lights in the pool. If it's open dawn to dusk, when you upgrade your swimming pool and you want to bling it up, there's LED color programmable lights that they're allowed in a pool that's not open at night. That open dawn to dusk versus night swimming seems like an innocuous differentiation, but it's not. And here's a terrible story that I heard. It was a condominium complex down in Palm Palm Springs, Southwest Florida, and they were not open for night swimming. They had a big party on the pool deck on 4th of July, and the board decided that they would go ahead and let the pool stay open until midnight that night because they were having such a fun time at the party. But the state Department of Health has not authorized this pool to be open at night. Unfortunately, one of their guests or tenants, I think she was renting a unit in that complex, dove into the shallow end and broke her neck. And it was after hours. When the lawsuit finally settled, she was a paraplegic. It's a terrible story as a result of this, but they had to do a special assessment to raise an additional $4 million to pay the claim after the insurance limits had been exceeded. And all of that came about because the board decided that they would be nice and friendly and allow the pool to be open after normal operating hours. So don't take those kind of risks. I think we could open this up to questions now, Diane.
Okay, great. Okay, everyone. Questions for John?
Sorry, Diane, I can't see. So any questions? Because if not, I think I might have a couple.
Yeah, would you please?
Sure. So, will you just kind of go over a little bit for the CAMs and board members that are on the time frame of, and I know that this is different depending on the size of the pool, obviously, but what are people looking at for the general time frame for renovating a condominium pool?
How often?
Like the time frame from start to finish, how much time should they allot when they're looking at the schedule when they want to try to start it so that it's over by their busy season?
So that depends on the scope of work, as you might imagine. If we were going to, and it also depends on the size of the swimming pool. We have condominium association pools that are skimmer pools that are under 1,000 square feet. And we're in the process of building an amenity center pool in Green Cove Springs right now that's 10,000 square feet. So there's a huge range of how much work it's going to take. But let's say, for example, a 2,500 square foot gutter pool, and let's say that the scope of work is going to be replace the water line tile, replace the step tile, replace the lights, a demo, and then reinstall new coping and refinish the swimming pool. In that case, from the time that we have a permit issued and we have all of our selections, color selections, we don't start until we have both of those, by the way. I would probably get that work done in 3 to 4 weeks. And I would tell the HOA that it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks because I want to be the hero.
100%. And how long, and obviously this can be different at different times of the year as well, but what is the time frame that you're seeing in your area that it's taking for permits to get approved?
Oh, okay.
That's a big one.
That's a huge one. So we're still working on a project down in Daytona Beach, and it was a storm damaged pool from 3 years ago storms well, not quite 3 years ago. In that case, we had to do some structural work on that swimming pool, and that swimming pool fell seaward of the CCCL line, which is the Coastal Construction Control Line. That's governed by the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. So I had to get a letter from them, and then I could submit to the state health department. And once I got that, I had to submit to the Daytona Beach Building Department. That whole process, keep in mind that this was right behind a storm that just inundated that little section of the east coast of Florida. So the building departments were overwhelmed. I worked on those permits for 9 months.
Wow.
That's the worst case
Wow.
we've ever had. A letter from if you're just doing a renovation on an existing swimming pool, like the scope of work that we discussed a minute ago, I can typically get that from the health department in a week to 10 days.
Okay.
We
So
have a
a
question.
wide range.
Wide
Yes.
range.
We have a question. In your opinion, which pool is better, salt or freshwater?
Better for what?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a salt chlorination system is something that we see on commercial. We don't build residential pools without a salt chlorination system. Commercial pools, we sometimes install them. They're more expensive on a commercial pool, but so you'll have an understanding of what we're talking about if you don't. Salt is sodium chloride, right? It's a molecule, table salt. And sodium is an inert, I mean, it doesn't bother us as humans. Chlorine is extremely poisonous. In World War I, that was used in the trenches to kill soldiers. So what happens with the salt pool is the water actually has about 3,000 parts per million concentration of salt. To give you an idea how salty that really is, the Atlantic Ocean here off the coast of Florida is 40,000 parts per million. So we're talking about 1/10 or 1/12 as salty as the ocean water is. It's not very salty at all. So what happens is we put that salt in the water, and there's an appliance that we install in the plumbing system. And that appliance is called a salt cell. There's a controller that goes on the wall. There's a salt cell. The salt cell has anodes and diodes, which are metal plates like you would see in a lead acid battery. One of them's positively charged, one of them's negatively charged, and they don't touch each other. They're low voltage, 24 volts. And they're energized when the pump's running and the water with salt in it runs through there. That electronic field ionizes the sodium chloride molecule, which means it breaks it into two separate ions: sodium, which we had determined earlier is inert, and chlorine, which is tremendously poisonous. And if you could see inside of a salt system when it's operating, it would look like billions of little champagne bubbles. Those little bubbles are chlorine gas, and they're poisonous. So as the water runs through that system, it's exposed to pure chlorine gas. By the time the water gets out of that electronic field, which the little appliance piece that we're referring to is about, I don't know, it's about 14 inches long, and that water's rushing through there. On its way back to the swimming pool, those sodium and chlorine ions recombine to reform salt. And so what's happening is, in a chlorine swimming pool, you're swimming in a concoction of chlorine and acid that's poison enough to kill everything but you. And it's kind of uncomfortable on our skin. In a salt chlorinated system, you're swimming in water that has been recently sanitized with chlorine gas, but now just has a little bit of salt in it. So from the perspective of comfort for swimmers, I certainly prefer the salt pool. The problem with that on a commercial pool is twofold. Number one is the health department will not allow that to be your sole sanitation system. You still have to have chlorine and acid pumps and possibly an ORP controller to back that system up. The other problem up with it is that salt cell is a wear part. Those anodes and diodes that I described wear out over time, kind of like the battery in your car wears out over time. They do require periodic maintenance, which, depending on the use of the pool, might be every 3 months or every 6 months. You have to disassemble them, soak those anodes and diodes in the diluted solution of muriatic acid to remove the calcium and lime that's built up on them, and put it back together. The problem is right here. At your residential pool, you typically run it 8 to 10 hours a day. On your commercial pool, it never turns off. It runs 24 hours a day in most cases. And so the wear factor on the salt chlorination system requires that salt cell to be replaced about every 2 or 3 years, and they're expensive. They're that 2,500 gallon or 2,500 square foot pool that we were talking about earlier would probably have 4 salt cells on it. And so you would be replacing those at about $1,000 a piece every couple of years. As far as the comfort of the swimmer and the ease of maintenance of the pool, absolutely salt. That was a big, long answer for a short question.
No, it's good info. Okay, Lindsay, do you want to run through the quiz?
Sure thing. So we have a quiz, and I know some of you are used to doing it where you get the question and then the answer, but we're running low on time, so we're going to do both at once. And feel free to jump in here if you have anything to add as I'm going through. The first question is, what is the maximum surface area for a skimmer pool under the DOH regulations? And the answer to that is 1,000 square feet. The next one, which of the following is required to maintain a commercial pool in Florida? And that would be a CPO license. So I know he covered that earlier for sure. What is the purpose of the collection tank in a commercial pool system? And that would be to prevent swimmer entrapment. And then what type of filter uses the discharge side of the pump for filtration? And that would be B, sand. The next question, what ORP range is considered optimal for commercial pool water? And that would be C, 650 to 750. Next question, what must be included in safety equipment for a commercial pool? And that would be D, all of the above. Shepherd's hook, life ring with 50 feet of rope, and a pool rule sign. All very important. Which pool type requires a gutter system? That would be C, a pool with 1,000 square feet of surface. When must a pool be brought up to current DOH code? That would be B, when refinishing the interior. What feature is required for night swimming approved commercial pools? And that would be B, white lights only. And additionally, I think you have to have certain amount of lighting per surface
on the deck.
And then what is the minimum gate latch height above the ground required by the DOH? And that would be D, 54 inches. And that is the end of the 10 questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, everyone, I am putting the contact information of Oakwells Aquatics into the chat, so you can click that link and go right to their website. I have worked with their team for over a year now and speak so highly of them. I have worked in the pool industry for a very long time, and they're not created equal. And so I'm very thankful for John and your expertise today. You could not tell that this is your first class, John. I wouldn't think you could tell.
Yeah, my shirt says it was.
Everybody, thank you so much for being with us today. Lindsay's going to go over how to get credit for this, and we will get you done by 2 o'clock as promised. Please take down all of our association ally contacts, and we highly recommend that you contact them when you are looking for one of your 3 bids. We understand it's budget season. It's upon us. We know that you're going to be looking for great vendors, and we truly do not work with anyone that we would not hire for our own purposes, and that way we can recommend them. And we're just so grateful that that John and the rest of the team that was with us today were here. So thanks, everyone.